All right, are we on? Can we hear me? Are you sure you're in the right room? There are too many people in this room. Right room? All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Code Smarter, Not Harder, some AI-powered dev hacks for all. So I think as developers, we're constantly looking for ways to improve our productivity and efficiency, and I think AI tools are really helping transform how we approach software development. As software developers, we want to do more than simply write code, right? So I want to start with this. Will AI replace software developers? This seems to be a question that keeps coming up over and over in every conversation I have. And I have some thoughts on this. I'll share them throughout. But first, I like to start with this one. AI won't replace developers, but developers who use AI will replace those who don't. Now, this is not a blanket statement, not like 100%, but I fundamentally believe in this because I believe it can make us more efficient. So today, I'm going to give you some tips on how to be in that second category. A little bit about me. I live outside of Cleveland. I'm a Java champion. I've been doing this too many years. I put that number up there. I don't like putting that up there. But my current role is a Spring Developer Advocate, which has been probably my favorite hat to wear. Probably because long before someone was paying me to do so, I've been a Java advocate, I've been a Spring advocate, so kind of best of both worlds for me. I'm a soon-to-be author. I've written a lot, but not like an actual book. That's going to change this year. I have a book coming out later this year called The Fundamentals of Software Engineering. And on par with this topic, I think a lot of people are talking about the fundamentals of software engineering with AI, saying, man, I wish I didn't learn all that stuff. I wish I didn't go to school. And I have the exact opposite approach of that. I think the fundamentals of software engineering are probably more important than ever. There's like that Reddit thread that's going around of somebody who was vibe coding for 4 months but wasn't using Git, and so they lost all their work and didn't know what to do. Again, I think that comes back to kind of the fundamentals. So, also, if you're interested in reading more about AI, I write a free newsletter that you can check out there. So I recently discovered something about myself. How many here enjoy programming? See a lot of hands. All right, that's good. I've kind of figured out that there are some things I don't like about programming. Maybe because I've been doing this so long, but I don't like the mundane task of typing things out all the time. Like, I've been doing this too long, and I just don't want to do that anymore, right? For me, have found out that, like, what I really enjoy about programming is being able to solve problems, being able to create things, being able to build things. The mundane task of kind of typing it out really is not for me. And so one thing that AI has done for me is kind of brought back the joy of programming. Again, being the dinosaur in the room, doing this for a long time, it's kind of rejuvenated me. It does reduce a lot of the drudgery that I used to hate, those mundane tasks. I'm able to take like rapid prototypes and bring them to fruition. It also gives me a bunch of productivity enhancements in everything I do, like writing, videos, coding, presentations, etc. So, will there be changes to the software industry? Of course. I mean, we've already kind of seen some of them, but I don't share the same fear as others do. There might be some reimagining of this role for sure, but I think we're only going to need more software developers. And I believe that a human in the loop for the verification and the correction of things, steering the system, being that domain product knowledge person or domain expert. So I'd advise programmers to start using AI as much as you can, be the supervisor of AI, use it like a pair programmer almost. I love this quote by Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO. He says, I think what AI does, quite frankly, is reduce the floor and raise the ceiling for all of us. So I'm not much of a hater on like this vibe coding term as a lot of people are. I think what's great about that is it does kind of reduce the floor, right? People can get into coding that don't have coding experience. They can take an idea and build something. And that's okay. Maybe it's a personal project. Maybe it's a personal website or something like that, or a tool. That's great, but also not great for like enterprise software development, right? I don't know that I'm vibe coding the next SaaS platform in the cloud, right? But it also raises the ceiling for us who do enjoy coding and want to be more productive and want to build more things. I think this is another good quote, and I'll just highlight adapt and learn. I think one of the biggest things that does not make me fearful of the future is I've always been kind of had the ability to adapt and learn. So as new things come out, we learn those new things, we adapt to a new way of doing things, and I think if you can do that, you can kind of stay relevant for as long as you want to be. So before we get into some kind of practical tips, I want to talk about the state of AI adoption. How it's being used across the industry, just so we can kind of gauge what people are using AI for. So 72% of developers express confidence in AI tools. This is particularly noteworthy because it represents real-world experience, not just kind of hype, right? 92% adoption from Fortune 500 companies, so it's not just for startups and techs and indie hackers. It's really becoming a standard across major enterprises. 26% productivity increase isn't theoretical. This is coming from an MIT study of over 4,800 developers from companies like Microsoft and Accenture. And 3 out of 4 developers are already using or planning to use AI tools, showing this isn't just about future potential, it's about current reality. Couple more numbers. How are developers putting AI to work today? So code generation is the obvious one, leads the way at 85%. This is everything from completing a simple function to suggesting entire code blocks to using some of these tools to kind of write entire applications, right? 77% for AI research and learning, so it's not just about coding, it's about understanding and problem solving. And 54% usage for debugging and testing represents growing trust in AI for quality assurance. Notice how these use cases are complementing developers rather than replacing them. So what we are using now is not replacing us, it is complementing us to be more effective. Okay, so in this presentation, I'm gonna go through some tips and tricks that I kind of use in my daily workflow. Some key takeaways from those tips. My hope is you walk away with 1 or 2 practical steps. I'm sure you're using some of these in your day-to-day workflows already, but I just wanted to share kind of what I'm using. All right, so I want to make some assumptions. You probably have used some generative AI, ChatGPT, Claude, etc. You may be using some form of coding assistance. That could be GitHub Copilot, or one of the kind of agentic IDEs. And then there's some warnings. With everything we do in AI, we got to think about privacy and security. Don't just kind of send all of your proprietary code and documents into the AI. Despite the name OpenAI, they're not very open, right? And they are training everything on the data that you are sending to them. Also, output risks. There are hallucinations that can lead to security issues. Also, there are times we can get back a lot of biased or inappropriate answers, right? Okay, so hack number 1, learning how to talk to robots. I think out of all the advice I shared today, this is probably the most valuable tip in the AI area. Learning how to effectively communicate with AI systems, whether you're a complete beginner or an experienced user, mastering how to craft clear, effective prompts will dramatically improve your results. So I'm not a huge term of prompt engineering. It feels very like gatekeepy to me, like it's something we all can't learn, and that's not true. In reality, it's just about clear communication, which I think we can all develop, right? So structure determines success, giving it context, examples, and specific instructions. I like to think of this as teaching an LLM what I want the response to be, not commanding it. So I got to give it more context. What am I trying to teach you so that I can get what I want out of this kind of relationship here? So a bad prompt would be, write a blog post about AI. If I walked up to your desk at work and I said, write a blog post about AI, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of questions, right? Like, how long do you want it to be? Who is the audience? What is the tone? Do you have a specific topic on AI, right? So this is a kind of a bad prompt. I think we all know this by now, but giving it much more context, like write a technical blog post explaining neural networks to junior developers, focusing on practical examples. Include code examples in Java and keep it under 1,000 words, right? So that's a much better prompt. Being able to effectively communicate with LLMs will greatly increase your responses. Some techniques that work. Again, be specific. Write a 500-word blog post about sustainable gardening beats write about gardening. I like this one. I want an email that sounds professional but friendly, like dear team. I hope this message finds you well. So you're giving it an example of what you want it to kind of sound like. Give it context. Who am I? Who's the persona that is trying to write this prompt here? As a marketing manager for a small business, I need to. Request formats. How do you want this outputted? Do you want it in text? Do you want it in bullets? Do you want it in JSON? How do you want to get it back? And then out of this is very much an iterative process. I think the first time I used ChatGPT, I kind of typed something in and I got some really bad response because my prompt was really bad. And I said, oh, this thing's garbage. It's no good. It's never going to last, right? So I've learned over time that like being able to communicate effectively will greatly increase your responses. And I like to save what works. When you find like a good prompt that is getting you results, save that. Use a collection, use a notebook, something. One place I save them is I use Claude a lot, and I use these projects that will kind of put all of these instructions together. So I can create different projects. This one is for YouTube content that I create. So I have a huge set of system instructions to Claude, and I save this off and refine this over time. So when you find things that work, make sure you save them so you don't have to like type them out again. Just a few advanced techniques. There are different terms that you hear, kind of like zero-shot prompting. This is when you just kind of throw something out there and see if it can go ahead and answer. Few-shot prompting is, I'm going to give you a couple examples. This is a good review. This is a bad review. Here's a review. Please kind of analyze it for me. There are also ways to organize your prompts. So if you have a long prompt, you want to break it down into section, you can use things like XML tags. It helps break it up for the large language model. It's able to kind of understand it a little bit better if you can break those up. And then task decomposition. Hey, break this down. First, summarize the key points, then identify counter arguments. You're kind of giving the system two tasks there to break down instead of everything at once. And then there's finding the right AI for each task, right? Every week a new model comes out. It's the greatest model. The benchmarks are the greatest thing ever. It's really up to you to kind of play around with these different models for the different tasks that you're using. Some models work better at different things, like coding and writing and planning and reasoning. It's really up to you to kind of find the right AI for each task. There are some really great prompt engineering guides out there. I think another one just dropped from Anthropic. But look for these, promptingguide.ai, OpenAI has one, Google has one. These are some good things to take a look at, go through. I mean, some of them are 60 pages, but I think this is a really good place to kind of invest some time in and learning some of these techniques. All right, so number 2, prompting with your voice. Now that we know that prompt engineering is a little bit more about being as clear as possible, this is really an iterative process, right? Like I'm not going to just type in, write a blog post. I'm going to type in a lot of information here. And I found, again, I don't like the mundane task of typing out this long prompt, right? So I am going to use dictation to be able to talk to a lot of these large language models. Now on the Mac, you can do this right in your settings. You can set up a keyboard shortcut. So I had it going to the microphone keyboard shortcut and using my microphone that's at home. There are also some really good products out there that do a lot better at this, I think. One of these is WhisperFlow. And so this will kind of dictate whatever you speak into the microphone. But for me, it like formats everything a lot better and puts everything together. And I'll just show you an example of this, because now whenever I go to, oops, we're not showing. There we go. Now whenever I go to, whether it's ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude, now I can come in here and say, write me a Spring Boot application that talks to a REST service and brings back a bunch of to-dos. Nope. All right, maybe it's not picking it up. But at home, I have my microphone in front of me, my good microphone, not the MacBook internal mic. And this works out really good. And again, because this is such an iterative process, I'm never giving it some kind of prompt and then done with it, right? I'm constantly like, it'd be like talking to a fellow coworker. So it's a long iterative process where I'm kind of working back and forth with ideas. And I feel like being able to just kind of talk to these large language models is so much easier. All right. Number 3, learning software development. So I love learning almost to a fault. I think AI has opened up a whole new way of learning for me and for everyone, right? So I'll give you a couple examples that I pulled out of being able to learn with AI. So I like using it for breaking down a concept. So we can use this to break something down like this. Like, hey, explain closures in JavaScript like you're explaining it to someone who just learned functions, then follow it up with, now explain it with a practical example. So you're actually getting some theory and then some practical examples with it. So it's a great way of learning new things. I wish I had something like this, like when I was getting started. I'd get into a new code base, I see some code, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Being able to like highlight some code and say, explain to me, walk me through this line by line, what is going on? And then use this as a learning path. Hey, let me ask for a personalized learning path. How would I learn this new thing? Give me some examples of it, especially some of the reasoning models. So if you use something like OpenAI's O3, this is really good at reasoning and planning. Create me a particular learning path on this particular topic, right? And then I think for like senior developers, hey, let's compare the performance implications with state management solutions in React. Or hey, I'm learning some architectural things between REST and gRPC. What are the differences? And yeah, I'm staying current. This is like always like one of the hardest things in our industry, right? We gotta keep learning new things. How can I stay current on new things? So I'm using AI to, hey, what's the performance benefits of using virtual threads in Java? So I don't know about you, but this is kind of what I feel like on a daily basis now. If I want to build something, I can. And sure, that's always been the possibility, right? But if I wanted to build something in the past, it's do I want to take the time to invest in learning this new thing to build the thing that I wanted to build? Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes the answer was that's too much time to invest in something that I don't know if I'm going to use, right? So I am big into like the Apple ecosystem. I have the phone, I have the watch, I have all the things, right? I've never written an app for Mac or for iOS. I've just really never had a need to. But I feel really confident that if I wanted to do that next week, I could go ahead and launch something, minus all the store stuff, right? But that's really like, I don't know, it's kind of brought back a lot of joy for me. Because I think once you know the basics of programming and learning how to effectively prompt or communicate with the large language models, and understanding like what a lot of these different models can do, sky's the limit. You can really learn anything. And I think that is what really excites me about AI. Okay, here's a surprising fact. Many in the industry claim that on average, developers spend roughly 10 times as much time reading code as they do writing it. So in other words, for every hour we spent actively typing out code, we spent about 10 hours devoted to understanding, reviewing, or otherwise reading code. That's crazy. That's on par with what I thought, but it's crazy to read. So we can use this for code comprehension using AI. So a lot of things that I'll do is, hey, paste some unfamiliar code and say, hey, explain this code's purpose and main functionality. I think we've all kind of done that, right? Like, explain this to me. What is this code trying to do? But I also throw in things like, hey, what are the design patterns being used here? Maybe I'm not familiar with a lot of design patterns, but I see some code here. I want to see if there's some design patterns in there, right? What are the dependencies? What are the data flows in this code? Break down complex functions. Hey, break this function into logical steps. Are there any potential side effects? This is another good one. Asking if there are side effects in this code that I'm using. So I just want to show you an example of this. Again, I have this on Claude Code, which is code comprehension. So I asked this question. Let me see if I can bump that up. Explain this code's purpose and main functionality. What are the design patterns? So there's a bunch of Java code here, and it gets in here and it says, okay, this code implements a caching layer for a data service with these main features. So it has these features. It also says, hey, there are some design patterns being used here. So if you're not familiar with something like the strategy pattern, now you can go, okay, now let me dive into that a little bit further. Let me do some research on the strategy pattern because we're using it here, but I didn't realize that that was what that was, right? So it goes into like, hey, here are some dependencies. Here's the data flow. You can even use it, especially something like Claude, you can ask it to generate diagrams. So you can get some really nice diagrams of like, let me see the entry point for this application and where all the different touch points are for it. All right. I wish I had this, 20 years ago, because I would get thrown into legacy projects. I would get thrown into new projects. And as someone with not a lot of experience, I'd be like, I don't know what's going on here. What is this application doing? It would take me days to get caught up on something. Now we can use AI to understand some of these things. Like, hey, what problem was this code likely trying to solve? Instead of having to like talk to a product owner about what this project is, now I can feed it some code and say, hey, like, what are we trying to solve here? What's the overall high-level goal of this code? You can even ask it, what might the original developer have chosen this approach? Maybe, given the context, it knows the year it was created and it knows what it was able to do at that time, and it may be able to explain that to you. You can also identify improvements. Hey, what is the maintainability concerns in this code? So we know we have some legacy code, but is there a lot of real tech debt here, right? How could we refactor this using modern practices? You could even take this a step further, saying like, I don't want to refactor this entire project, but in this particular package, how can I refactor just this code? So I really like it, obviously for writing code, but for also reading code. Okay, number 5, documentation. This is kind of one of my go-to cases for using AI, which is documentation, technical writing, anything that kind of falls into that category. So if you're thrown onto a new project or you just started with a new company, I always like trying to get in there, get into a code base and kind of get those quick wins and be kind of that valuable asset right away, right? And one of those is documentation. So if you go into a code base and you see these classes are not documented, we don't have API docs, things like that, AI is great for this. Go in, look at a class, look at a function, look at a method, and generate documentation for that. So you can do that kind of inline without using one of these like agentic AI systems. Again, another thing is explaining complex algorithms and logic flows. So I want to read all of the code here, and now I want to create some documentation based on that so that the next person that comes along understands what this code is trying to do. Creating usage examples and sample code, really good output for this. Again, I think one of the biggest pains for me has always been being thrown into a project and saying, hey, you have to talk to these 3 different APIs, and there's no documentation for them. Huge pain, right? Now we can kind of start generating some of that documentation. I also use it for technical writing. I do a lot of writing, but also like within your organization, this will really help out. Just taking existing documentation and saying, hey, improve the clarity and consistency of our existing documentation. It might have been written by 5 different people on 5 different projects. Let's try and get some clarity between these. Maybe we have some style guides, but again, this team wrote this one and this team wrote this one. Here's my style guide. Don't change anything. Just kind of try to adapt to that style guide. Suggest better wording and explanations. Converting technical jargon into clear language. Maybe there's a different audience. Maybe we wrote some internal documentation for our developers, and now we need to take that same documentation and give it to, say, a user audience. That's not the same, right? Let's rewrite that in a different tone, different audience. And again, that's where prompt engineering comes in. Being able to kind of, don't just say, hey, write this documentation for a user, really giving it some examples of user documentation that you have. Here's what I want it to sound like. Here's my audience, etc. I like this a lot for converting documentation from one format to another. So maybe we have some HTML, or maybe we have some like plain HTML documentation, and we want to just format it into Markdown because we want to include it in some system that's using Markdown. So that's one great case. Here's some HTML, turn it into Markdown. And then creating new documentation. So I actually do this a lot. I have a bunch of repos on GitHub because I create a bunch of small demos and I want to put them out into the world. And I don't want to write documentation for them. But I know that I want, if somebody comes to that repo, I want them to know what it is used for and how to get started with it. So there are a lot of the large language models now, like Google Gemini, Anthropic, I think even OpenAI now does this. You can connect right to a GitHub repo. So if you have a GitHub repo, you can kind of use that as context and basically say, hey, write me a README file based on all of this code. You couldn't do this before, so I ended up starting a project on my own to do this. And it was able to basically take all of the code, concatenate it into a single file, and hand that off to an LLM. That's kind of what Git ingest does as well. But I don't think you need to do this as much these days because they have access to GitHub. And I'll actually show you an example of that. So again, over on Claude, I have these things called projects. You can do these in OpenAI, and I believe in Google Gemini as well. But this is a project, is like, this is the thing that I'm trying to work on. In this case, I have a GitHub README generator project. And what the key part of this is this project instructions. So over time, I've kind of iterated on this and said, hey, this is how I want my GitHub READMEs to look. There is a certain structure to it. Here's the name of the repository. There's a whole bunch of, here, the structure, tone and style, text formatting, code formatting, what is the output, artifact usage, etc. What this does for me is now I don't have to come here every time and say, write me a GitHub repo. Here's all the things that you need to think about when writing it, right? So now what I can do is I can just come in here and say, all right, I want to connect to GitHub. So let's go add to GitHub. I have this Java 1 MCP. That'll be fine. So I'll go ahead and just select all of it. And I'll add that as files to the context. And now I don't even need to ask Claude anything because I've already kind of defined my system instructions. So now what it's going to go off and do is look at all of the relevant code. And again, if you had a huge project and didn't want to include all of it, maybe just like a package or two, you could include that and then just look at those particular files. But you see now, it is based on what I've given it. It's written an introduction. It said, here are your project requirements. Here are your dependencies, how to get started, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this may not always be the end-all, be-all. This may not be 100%. But this gets me like going really good. I may just go in there and tweak a few things and then send this to GitHub. Now, this is not this is something that would have taken me a long time to produce. And now I'm just kind of generating that. And I think for something like a GitHub README, especially for me, like it's just a demo application, this is a good use case. If this is being used in a more professional setting, an enterprise setting, you'll definitely want to go through and kind of iterate on that prompt that you're sending it, and also review everything that these large language models are putting out, and give that the same review process that you would something else. So, but I think this gets me to a really good point. All right. No. All right. Number 6, building tools. One of the things I love about being a programmer is being able to solve my own problems. One of the ways I can do this is by building tools, and AI has really helped me out in this. Honestly, probably when one of my main drivers, like I'm not building something for the world to use. I may just be building something that I want to use. Maybe it turns into something, but this really helps me kind of prototype some tools right away. I love this quote, people are tool builders with an inherent drive to understand and create, which leads to the world getting better for all of us. Agree with that. So what kind of tools can we create? We can get into things like data processing. Hey, I want to write some data format converters, JSON to CSV, YAML to JSON, etc. We can write some development workflow tools. Maybe I want to generate some code documentation, right? Or Git hooks for automated code formatting and validation. Maybe I want to write some API and testing tools. So maybe some mock server for our development environment. We could get into like code quality and maintenance. We can write some type definition generators, right? Or code migration assistance. In the DevOps area, we can do things like deployment checklist automations or infrastructure cost analyzers. There are a whole bunch of different tools. If you ever find yourself kind of doing the same thing over and over again and say, is there a tool for that? No, there isn't. Well, then go off and create one. So what are some things that we can build with AI? So we can build some CLI tools. I built a bunch of CLI tools just on my local laptop. And you can use whatever programming language you want, right? Like, I don't know, I don't use Bash a lot, but if I wanted to write a CLI written in Bash, I feel like I could do so. I can also use something like Spring to write some command line tools. But you can go ahead and streamline whatever you're kind of doing over and over again. Again, I think a big thing for me with AI is like, let me think about the things that are day-to-day that I don't want to be doing and kind of try to offload that to AI so I can focus more on the things I do want to be doing. If you've never written an IDE or a text editor plugin, but have always wanted to, this is a really great opportunity. And I'll share an example of that in a second. Again, I've never written a Chrome plugin. I feel like I could do so if I wanted to today. Reporting tools, so I have to, for work, I have to kind of report back on some of the content that I'm creating, how many views something got on YouTube, or how many likes something got that was posted on an article. Whatever, kind of silly, but I have to like collect these metrics, right? So I wrote some CLI tools using things like the YouTube API to be able to connect to YouTube and automatically pull these down so that I don't have to go out there and kind of do this like every quarter or so. This is where it gets fun. So whatever like some of your favorite tools are that you use on a day-to-day basis, maybe you can write plugins for those. And a personal story, I actually did this. So I don't know if anybody's heard of Raycast, but Raycast is kind of a Spotlight replacement for Mac. It allows you to kind of quickly jump to things. So I want to open an app, I want to do some calculation, and it has plugins for everything. Like, hey, I need to copy an emoji or find a logo for whatever thing that I'm trying to work on, right? There's all these plugins that you can plug into Raycast. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, okay, well, we have this Spring initializer. You can go here, create a new project. You do this within your IDEs. It uses the same kind of API behind the scenes. So if you're using like IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code or start.spring.io, they're kind of all using the same API behind the scenes. So I started thinking, like, could I create an extension for Raycast to do the same thing? So I jump into the documentation, and there's a whole bunch of good docs on it. And I realized that if you want to create an extension in Raycast, it's all done in React. Now, I have nothing against React, but I've never really used it. I've used some other component frameworks like Angular and Vue. So if you showed me some code, I can get pretty familiar with it. But this goes back to something I said earlier. If I wanted to create this extension prior to AI, I'd have to ask myself, do I really want to learn React just for the sole purpose of creating this extension, right? And again, time is money, right? We don't have a lot of time. So do I want to invest the time in learning React? Not really. That would be my answer, right? But now I don't have to worry about this. I can use AI. Again, I know enough to look at it and see what's going on. If there's errors, I can feed that to an LLM and get some responses. So I ended up creating this extension after probably 2 days, actually a couple days. Most of it was just trying to get it published on their side. The coding aspect was probably a few hours. So now if you go into Raycast, you can add this from the Raycast store. But if you go to the Spring initializer, now I can come in here and say, all right, I'm creating a Maven project using Java 3.4.5. I can fill in some metadata about this. We are going to use Java 24. Oh, no. Thank you. So here that is. So I can pick out those things, and I can fill in some dependencies. So Spring Web, Spring AI, it's not in there, config, whatever. So I can fill out some metadata about this. But again, this is a tool that I was able to create in a matter of time instead of having to invest all that time into learning something new. But I did learn some things about React. I did learn some things about publishing to the Raycast store. So if I want to go ahead and publish another one, I could do so. Okay, working with data. So AI is not just for generating content. It is your instant data engineer. You can use it to transform formats, generate code from raw data, clean data sets, build database solutions in minutes instead of hours. These are some really good practical use cases for today, not for tomorrow. So one of the things I do a lot is transform data between formats. Here's some JSON, turn that, or here's some XML, turn that into JSON. Right? Here's a CSV file, turn that into JSON. Data to code. I have a whole bunch of JSON. Maybe I got a JSON response from an API. I want to generate all of the code for this. Turn this into a Java record or a set of Java records. If it's a bunch of Java records, maybe I can say, take all of these Java records, put them in a single class so I can use them at once, and give me an example of how to run those. And I'll show an example of that. One of the biggest pains for me is like you get this like large JSON response and you try to consume it and it's like there's something wrong. And I'm like, what's wrong? I got to hunt through this. Usually there's pointers to kind of help you out. You're like staring at this code going, I don't see anything wrong with this. There's nothing wrong here, right? Feed a bunch of this JSON data and say, what is wrong with this data? There's something missing or some invalid portion of this. Suggest optimal data structures based on your use case. I like writing data validation rules and schemas. Actually, let me go back to this and just kind of show you that in Claude. So I'm going to go here. And again, I did this. Here's a bunch of JSON. So I have like name, but I also have an address in here, which also has a geo. I have a phone, website, company is another type. So I said, take this and convert this to Java records. It says, OK, I can kind of pick out the records that I would need for this. Here we go. And then what it looks like is this. So here's our record for geo, address, company, user. And then they even give you an example of how to go ahead and create a new user based on all of these records. So pretty cool use case for me. All right, another thing that I used to do a lot is generate fake data for my applications. Whether it's a demo or some kind of MVP, I've got to create a bunch of data for this application. And AI has been really good at this. So I've used other projects in the past, like Faker, but the problem for me with that is like I have to include that code in my sample project just to generate a bunch of fake data. And sometimes the data wasn't all that good, right? It was just to generate 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 records. But that shouldn't be code that's sitting in my code base. Really what I want out of that is fake data. And what you can do with this is get realistic with it. So it's not just John Smith at 123 ABC Company, right? We can generate diverse user profiles. We can have kind of demographic variety for like UI testing. Simulate time series data, create localized content, and generate a bunch of edge cases where we can kind of stress test our application. So this is something else I really love doing, and let me show you an example of that. And so here's my e-commerce profile data set. You could see in this, and again, you can always ask, I don't think I wrote this out. I think I asked AI to help me kind of generate this prompt. But hey, I want a data set of 10 user profiles for an e-commerce app. Each profile should include all of those. Membership, we want purchase history. We want to include these products. I want a shipping address. And I want realistic names and postal codes for Chicago. Right? I'm getting very specific with the fake data that I need for this application. And what I got out of this is a lot of really good data. So now I can kind of plug that into my MVP, my demo that I'm working on, to get up and running. So this is something, again, that kind of would have taken me a long time in the past. All right, working with data. So being able to write SQL queries for complex operations. Here are my tables. Write me an optimized query that's going to go ahead and talk to this and get this particular data set out. Designing database schemas. Hey, here's some data. Write a schema file for me. I don't want to write that, right? Optimizing queries. Hey, I have this query right now. Here are the tables. Here's the current performance of that. Yes, you can go into your database tools and ask for and explain and find out what's going on. Or you can do things like, hey, why is this particular SQL not running as performant as we think it should be? I like this too, converting between SQL dialects. So I have this my SQL schema, and I'm moving over to Postgres. Just rewrite this in a Postgres dialect, right? And then generating database migration scripts, really good use case. Writing stored procedures and triggers. Okay, number 8, running models locally. So I talked a lot about some of the privacy and security concerns with sending all of your data to some of these cloud models, right? There are a lot of pros and benefits to running these models locally. Privacy and security is number 1 for me. Like, hey, if we're working on our code that's on our machine that is proprietary, we are not sending it out to the frontier models, right? Performance can be really good. Some of these smaller models that I run on my machine, very, very fast. Development and testing, cost control, hey, we're not paying for this because it's just a model running on our machine, and really allows us to customize this. So there are some ways that you can run these on your local machine. There is Ollama. So if you go out to Ollama, you can download Ollama, and then you can look at some different models that are available, and you can run them. Now, when you go into the different models, they will show you how big, how large this model is. Again, be careful. Some of them are like 70 billion parameter models that are very big and probably won't run on your machine, but there are some models that are pretty lightweight that you can run. So you can do this in Ollama, and if you run Ollama, you'll run it from the terminal and ask it a question and interact with the terminal. If you don't want to interact with the terminal, you can use some other projects out there, one of which is Open Web UI. So this will look at what models are running on your local machine and give you kind of that ChatGPT familiar interface to talk to those local models. There is also Docker Model Runner, which just came out. Now my screenshot says Docker Desktop for Mac with Apple. They did release, I believe, a Windows version of this as of a week or 2 ago. But this just allows you, if you're using Docker, to say install one of these local models. So I can go ahead and install one of these models, and I can go ahead and start chatting with it right within my terminal. Now I will show you something. So let's see here. So I can say Docker model run. I already have installed this Gemma 3 from Google. So if I go ahead and run that, now I'm in that interactive chat mode. I can go ahead and say, tell me something interesting about Spring I/O conference. So now you see it's pretty fast. So I like that. I don't get that latency. I'm not paying anything for this. Now the models, there are some pros and cons, right? The models that we're using on our local machines, probably not as great as some of the frontier models out there. But if you just want to like get up and running with something, I think this is a really good approach. And whether we're using Ollama or Docker Model Runner, we can use these within our Spring apps. So if you're coming to Spring AI workshop later, I think we'll touch on this a little bit, but if you use Ollama, you can pick Ollama, and if you're using Docker Model Runner, that is actually just using the OpenAI API. So you can go ahead and just change the base URL, and now I'm using this local model that I installed through Docker right on my machine using Spring AI. Now obviously, if we're to publish this somewhere, we need to make sure that that URL is something different and a different model running somewhere else. But whether you're using Ollama, whether you're using Docker Model Runner, to run these models locally, you can use these within something like Spring AI. All right, my last one, guiding AI coding tools. So there are a lot of really great AI coding tools out there. I want to give you some tips and tricks on how to get the most out of them, and we'll wrap it up with an example on kind of how to guide an AI to your desired output. So there's kind of been an evolution of these tools, right? First, we kind of start with the standalone chatbot assistants. These are things like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. We kind of moved into inline IDE coding assistants. These are providing real-time code suggestions and completions within your editor, often augmented by an IDE chat or documentation feature. These are things like GitHub Copilot, JetBrains AI, Amazon Code Whisperer. Now we've kind of moved into this like other category here, which is agentic AI IDEs. And this really acts as like a pair programmer that can manage multi-step coding tasks autonomously. So these are things like our Cursor in our Windsurf, and IntelliJ just launched something called Junie. So I'll look at an example of this, but I just want to give some quick tips on this. I like to say, remember that you are the pilot, not the passenger. So you are not just along for this ride to keep clicking yes and hope for the best. You really have to guide it. Again, it comes back to prompt engineering, but it also comes back to your knowledge of whatever you're working on, your programming knowledge, your how many years of experience, right? Watch what it's trying to produce and iterate on that. If it does something wrong, if it writes something you don't want it to write, say no and start over, right? And I don't know if I have this as oh yeah, I do. It's the next one. Part of that is having a branching strategy. Don't just go on main and start vibe coding everything that you want. You know, pick out like a small feature that you want to work on, create a branch for that, and then that way if things go south, you can always kind of clean that up from that branch. AI can and will generate incorrect and inefficient code, right? We have to remember that. I think applying the same rigorous testing to your AI-generated code as the code that you write in-house is very important. This becomes more important to have those processes in place, like code reviews. Again, making sure we're really kind of reviewing what is coming out of these systems for clarity. Again, clear, specific instructions. AI models train on vast data sets, including open source code with various licenses, right? Like some of the times we don't know this. So if you are in an enterprise and you can only use code that has a specific license, we need to be sure of that. And there's ways we can kind of provide that as context when we're generating code. Take the time to comprehend why the AI suggested a particular piece of code, and understand that AI may use outdated information. So I want to show you an example of something I did in Junie. So Junie is JetBrains' kind of AI coding agent, and I asked it to write a service that talked to the JSON placeholder service that, there we go, sorry, that talked to some other service, and within that, I wanted it to write this application that talked to a service and just did a few simple things, right? And so I put in, as best as I could, the best prompt I can come up with, and it created a pretty good application, but I found some problems with it, right? Actually, this wasn't a record to begin with. The first time I wrote it, it kind of wrote a class, and I said, you know, I prefer immutability. I'd want to use a Java record where possible. It was using the REST template to talk to another service. I wanted to use the REST client. The package structure wasn't what I wanted. So I came back and maybe that one. Yeah, okay, this is that one. So it has like a class and package structure that I didn't like. But with a lot of these coding agents, one thing you can do is kind of guide them to kind of conform to your coding standards, your preferences. So whether you're using Cursor or Junie or Windsurf, there's ways to provide context. And in Junie, you can create a .junie folder, and you can give it some guidelines. And so again, these aren't like really complex guidelines. You could probably get a lot more out of this if you spent some time iterating on this. But I said, hey, if you're using Spring Boot, use the latest version. If I ask you to create a project, I want you to prefer package by feature instead of package by layer. And I gave it some examples. And again, I didn't write all this. I asked AI to write a lot of this for me and gave it some instructions to do so. So avoid this, use this. If you're doing data access, I prefer this. If you are using an HTTP client, I want you to use the REST client over the REST template. If you're using Java language features, hey, I want to prefer immutability. Use a Java record when you can. I don't need a class. Here are some quick Spring Framework best practices. Here are some things I want in my tests. And here are some general code quality comments. Again, this can be as very specific as you want it to be. And usually this is language specific, right? You could have one for like Java, one for Spring. If you're doing some front-end development in Angular, you could have one for that as well. So when you get in to start using some of these AI agents, take a look at how they allow you to add context and take some time to put these guidelines together. I think that is it. We're at time anyway, so that's good. All right, with that, I'll take some questions. Anyone? All right, that's good. That means I got one.
With agentic leader, you can choose what model you can use.
So the question is, with these agentic IDEs, can you choose what model you use? In some cases, yes. In some cases, no. So Windsurf and Cursor allow you to pick the model. Junie does not right now, but I've heard they are working on plans to do so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.